episode is the second part of my conversation with Maria Theoharous in advance of our feed swap next week. In this part, we find out just how organised is the maker of the Sew Organised Style podcast. Plus, we share which of our previous guests have surprised us and how. So stick around just 1 minute and we'll get into it. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 16 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impacts that it may have. And I really hope you'll join me in this journey. I hope you're doing well today. Yes, your podcast feed is to be believed. This is the second episode of Check Your Thread in 1 week. So this is the second part of my conversation with Maria from Sew Organised Style podcast. So if you haven't heard that already, definitely put this one on pause and go and listen to the episode that we released earlier this week first. That's episode 138. Assuming you've already listened to that one, let's get stuck into this. Thanks so much to everyone who has already left a comment saying that you enjoyed the first half of the conversation. So as always, links to everything mentioned in this episode that is linkable is in the show notes, and that is on the website checkyourthread.com. So until next week, when you'll hear the actual feed swap, take care of yourself and enjoy. Okay, so what is the goal or mission of your podcast? Just to make it super clear.
To make it super clear, because I had to make it super clear for myself when I wrote down my answer.
It's helpful doing these, isn't it?
My homework. So it's raising the visibility of what sewers want from the industry, what they want for themselves, raising the visibility of older sewers. And I'm raising the idea that sewers are the buyers and we're letting businesses know what we want, not what we're being given. So that's being a little bit political.
Nice.
And I want to make sure that people understand that our hobbies can add to landfill if we're not mindful about what we're purchasing and what we're using, what resources we're using and how much we create. So I think that's why we're both kind of on the same wavelength, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But you've also got a big community aspect to your podcast as well, haven't you? I mean, by the people that you have on, they're often people that are engaged in various aspects of sewing community as well.
Very much so. I mean, to the point of, people who are sewing for overseas communities, sewing for young girls so that they can go to school and not be disadvantaged because they can't afford to buy period pads. They have reusable ones. They've got, Days for Girls, they do that sewing, and that's international.
Yeah.
And then there are the others who are creating patterns for women who are living with the long-term effects of breast cancer or any sort of cancer. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So things like that. Okay. What are the goals or missions of your podcast?
Oh, okay. So I know this because I did my exercise with my coach, Kim. I call it my manifesto because I like the energy that brings. So the overall vision of my manifesto for Check Your Thread is I want a world where the impact on the environment is factored into every decision, including sewing, from what resources we're buying to how we choose to use it or not. I think at this point, with the climate crisis, we have to make the climate and the impact on the environment fundamental in every decision. I don't think we have a choice at this point. So that's that. And then my mission, how I do that basically, is I help people to make more sustainable choices by giving them information, ideas, inspiration, and agency. And I feel that by starting to sew more sustainably, it's then possible to do lots of other things more sustainably, that these ideas and approaches can spread out into many areas of life. And also to spread the idea that living more sustainably can be fun and fulfilling, and not just about like hand-wringing and eco-snobbery or feeling deprived. And also I feel that Check Your Thread reflects the values of a wider community of people having ideas and interesting conversations and making things happen. Our Check Your Thread sub-community feels positive, supportive and fun. So that's my mission.
You did better than I did. It's a manifesto. It's not just a mission or goal.
Doing that work, it's really helped me, and not just making the podcast, but really making decisions in all sorts of aspects of my life, really. Like, what am I doing? Like, and for example, a perfect example is when I get those emails from random people promoting people who want to be on my podcast, I'm like, I can almost like run that through the filter of my mission. Like, is any of this hitting any of that? Is it helping to produce any of this? So that's why, you know, sometimes people do get in touch with me and they want to promote a book or something. But if it does help fulfill those things, then come and talk to me, you know. I'm not against people wanting to kind of tell people about a thing that they've made, you know. But it has to fulfill some of that, otherwise.
Well, it's just not the right fit. Yeah.
Exactly. And having done that work and having those things really clearly laid out makes it very easy to figure out if it is a good fit or not, you know. Alrighty. So have any of your guests surprised you in some way?
Okay, so they all surprised me. And what I love about each of them, like a lot of them, if they have a particular love of a technique or a skill, I love seeing what they do to develop that afterwards. So they might come on and they'll talk about it, but then afterwards I get to see, I follow those people, of course, and I'm actually not surprised when they end up taking that further and spreading that joy to other people, either through teaching or developing resources that others can use. So, I mean, I did have, I've had some people who, when they've come on, I thought I knew what they were going to talk about, and then it changed. It's like, yeah, okay, no worries.
Yeah.
That was Denise, who lives in Portland, and we were supposed to be talking about sewing for breast cancer, living with breast cancer, all the outcomes of it. And she just went ahead and said, well, I'm going to tell you what it's like. And she said, are you ready? And I said, okay. And she told me everything physical that happened and all the decisions. And that was not about sewing, but that's the body that she lives in. And so she's got to be mindful that whatever she sews does not feel uncomfortable. Yeah.
That's really powerful.
Yeah, it was. And so there have been a few, like hers, I had a warning at the start. And when I published it, I made sure that it wasn't for children. And I made sure that, when it goes, because you and I have the responsibility to make sure that when you have podcasts like that, you have to make sure that there is a warning for listeners. Yeah, because it's on us. It's our responsibility, not the person that we're interviewing. So I've had a couple like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've only ever had to do a warning where there was a couple of swearsies got dropped in one episode. Like you say, we do have that responsibility. And also, as a parent who knows how difficult it can be to kind of fit in your podcast listening with your life, like you want to make it so that somebody can finish up a podcast episode whilst their kid's in the back of the car or, whilst they're preparing dinner in the other room and somebody walks in or something, don't you? You want to make it so that it can be enjoyed in as many arenas of people's lives as possible, I feel.
Your turn.
Okay, mine is so trivial in comparison to what you just said. It's like the completely other end of the scale. But I was most surprised by when I interviewed Birgitta Helmerson and she had an Australian accent.
Oh, okay. It's still a surprise.
It was, So what it was is I was really nervous about speaking I get nervous before speaking to everybody, even almost 3 years in. I still get nervous. I mean, not so much with yourself because I've spoken to you previously, but people if I haven't spoken to them before. Because I think that when you start talking to somebody, you want to get them, as you were saying, like you want to get them feeling as comfortable as possible, don't you? Quickly. Yeah. So I feel that there's a lot of pressure in that first few minutes to create a nice, relaxing atmosphere that people feel jovial and comfortable and happy, and because they're probably a little bit nervous as well, unless they've been on a million podcasts. So whilst I was waiting for Birgitta to join the session, to join the recording session, I was doing some breathing. And with the app that we're using, that is the one that I always use, when somebody joins, there's always a sound that you get. That is like, boo, I don't know. But for some reason, that sound didn't go off when she joined. So there's me doing my breathing with my eyes closed, and I open my eyes and she's there. And she was just kind of chuckling, I think, because I was obviously looking ridiculous and wasn't aware that she'd arrived. And then she starts talking with her Australian accent because, you know, she lives in Sweden and her name's Birgitta Helmsen. And I was like, it was just not what I was expecting. And because there's not that much information about her past or whatever on the website. So I'd done as much research as I could, but there wasn't that much to learn in advance. Yeah. So, yeah. So I was very kind of like, oh. And I had to kind of pull myself together quite quickly to carry on.
Nice. Good save.
So how organised... Okay, so your name of your podcast is Sew Organised Style. How organised are you with your podcast making process?
Now, 5 years later, I record and edit during the week. That's Monday to Friday. I remember that it's Monday to Friday. And I have a...
You know that now?
I do. It's taken me since COVID to get that right. So I have a 2-month plan of recordings, and so I know when things are going out. And I try and record 6 weeks ahead of schedule. But when I first started, there was no way I was organised. I can tell you that right now.
So where did the name of your podcast come from then?
Well, there was 3 of us at the time when I first started it. So Sewing, Organisation and Style. There was a style person, there was a sewing person, and I was supposed to be the organised person who got it all together.
Oh, that's so funny.
So that was the intention, and then that didn't work out that way, but that's fine, and I haven't changed it. And when I went to college, I showed them, oh, this is my logo, white text on black background. And the teacher said, get rid of the black. That was the first thing she said, was to get rid of it. Like, oh, okay, sure. But I had to rebadge everything. So am I organised? I am now.
You sound really organised now. That's so funny. But making the podcast has made you organised.
Well, actually talking to you made me more organised during the week.
Really?
Because we had that discussion, and that was only 2 months ago. And, yeah, Monday to Friday I have everything that I have to get done. I tick them off at the end of the day and I think, cool. And I sleep better. So thank you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, you're so welcome.
So I think I've already let people know how organised you are with the podcast.
I don't feel organised at all. Mm-hmm. I feel like a chaotic mess, but I bring it together when it counts. But I mean, I have my systems in place, but I'm a very analog person. Like, I'm not very techie. I have as fewer kind of apps and I have as few as possible. Like, I literally have, like
your book,
a paper notebook. I've got a paper calendar. I have the bare minimum of kind of techie things that I need, but it kind of works for me. And I've got my systems of where I make my notes and how I, communicate with people. But like you develop it over time. But I think because of having the pressure of having to work within the hours of school drop off and school pick up 4 days a week. And then I do end up doing some stuff in the evenings, and I do sometimes end up doing some stuff at the weekends. But I try to keep that to a minimum, obviously, to kind of have a little bit of downtime. And also, like, my brain doesn't work very well after dark. But so, yeah, I think just having that clear parameter of time where I have to get things done. I can't waft about. I have to kind of get it done. So it's enforced organisation, really.
But that way you have your downtime, and that's the goal.
Yeah, because otherwise no sewing would happen, would it?
That's no good.
Yeah. Right. Are you ready? So what part of the podcast making process do you enjoy the most?
The face-to-face chat. It's when they finally come on and we have a chat, and I love that.
Do you get nervous before?
I would say no, but then the nervousness comes when they first come on and you say hi, and then I don't know what to do next to actually get to the question. So I've actually got a couple of stock standard sentences that get me there. So the nerves now are if I haven't prepped. So I make sure that I prep, and if I don't prep for that particular one, I'll have prep from others that I can use. So it's the chatting that I enjoy the most.
Nice.
Yeah.
How much research do you do on somebody before you speak to them?
I check their social media. and whoever gives me information about that person, I will look that up. So it's not a lot, because sometimes there's not a lot to find out, and sometimes it's a matter of asking follow-up questions when they're with me, because I say, oh, there's nothing special about me, but there always actually is. But it's just trying to find that. And yeah. What about your research? You do a lot of research. It's what it sounds like. Yeah.
I do a lot of research. Yeah, I do. I want to get a good sense of someone's body of work, if that's relevant to the person, or their interests or their angle. I try and absorb as much of that as possible. So, yeah, trawling through social media if they have a profile, if they've got a website, reading as much of the website as I can, checking if they've been on any other podcasts as well. I think that gives you a really good flavour of somebody, and then also it allows you to come up with some reference points. You can be like, oh, I heard you talking about this on this podcast, but I'd really like to follow up on that and find out more about that. Or like you can learn about more, but then also I think you can make for them a more enjoyable experience, because they can be like, oh, no one's ever asked me that before. I'm like, I know, I've heard everything you've ever been on. I listen to other people's conversations, when I'm walking to and from the school and stuff like that, and then make a lot of notes, and then come up with an outline of the points that I want to hit throughout a conversation. Then it's always a balance, isn't it, between making sure that you do hit those points when you're talking to them, but giving yourself the freedom and giving them the freedom to go in another direction, or if they say something interesting, then following it up rather than being like, right, now next question. So it's a balance, but I definitely feel like having that outline at least going in makes me feel a bit more confident as well, because I know that, okay, at the minimum, if we talk about these things, I know that it will be a good episode. And
sometimes when people are nervous, they continue to talk and they don't really take a breath, and they just keep talking, and you want to ask a follow-up question of something that they've said. It kind of sounds like that, right? But then I'll actually write notes so that if they talk about something, if they mention something I think, oh, that'd be interesting, I let them talk, because they are nervous, and then I'll follow that up, and they'll say, don't be wrong, you said da-da-da. Can you expand on that? Because that sounded really interesting.
Yeah, thanks. You're really good at that.
I probably only do that once, and that helps them think, oh, she was actually listening. It's like, yeah, I was listening, because you're actually interesting. So don't worry about your nerves. And then most of the time I take the white space out. So the ums and the ahs, I'll take them out. But it depends on what they're talking about, and I'll actually add more silence so that you can hear the various parts of what they're saying.
And, interesting.
Yeah. So I don't manipulate what they say, but I try and make sure that if there was something that they said which was important, that I make sure that listeners can hear that piece.
Interesting. I actually talk quite a lot during the podcast conversation, but I edit myself out quite a lot, if you get what I mean. So I do make a lot of encouraging noises like, oh, really? Yeah. And I'll take that out. So they have the feeling that, I am really following along, but that it's not super annoying for the listeners to hear me interject all the time,
I think I've noticed that happens a lot with some people, because you'll ask them a question, they'll make a statement, and you go, and then they continue, because then they can see that you've understood, or that, that's the right way to answer the question, then they keep going. So it's kind of an encouraging, that's it, that's right, keep going, and then they're fine. Yeah, but that's right, we take that out, because people don't need to hear us say, oh yeah, every 5 seconds.
But it's more natural for them, isn't it, to have someone going, oh, really? Yeah, cool. That's because that's how natural conversation between two people exists. And there is a lot of overtalk in regular conversation. But you don't want to always hear that in an episode, do you? Yeah. What part of the podcast making process do you enjoy the least?
The time it takes to edit. I love editing, but so it takes me 1 hour of editing for every 10 minutes, because I hand edit what you hear.
Yeah. Everyone needs to know that, people. It can take an hour for every 10 minutes that you hear.
And the people who know the effect of that are our guests, because I always get the comment. The most common comment I get back is, I didn't know I sounded that good, and then they laugh, because they know it was the work that I put into it to make sure that they sounded that good. I'm going, oh, that was just you know that. And then it's like an insider joke.
Yeah. But no, you're right. It's creating a balance, isn't it, between it being legitimately how they are responding and how. But I mean, I try and remove a lot of repetition, for example. And people do have a lot of repetition in their natural conversation, but it doesn't make for a good listening, I think, you know? So I think probably the editing, I do enjoy the editing, and it's useful as well because often I'm writing my show notes at the same time and I'm coming up with, like, as I'm re-listening, because when you're talking to somebody, you're so in the conversation, aren't you? For me, it takes listening back during the edit to really extract, like, almost like the overview of what was actually going on there in that conversation, you know? Like, I don't like the way that it takes so long and you're just sitting there with headphones on. A love-hate relationship we both have with editing.
Yeah, I know. And sometimes if the conversation was fun and then you have to listen to it while you're editing, like, it's too lots of fun all in one go.
Totally.
Next question.
Alrighty. So, how has podcast making affected your sewing life?
Affected in two ways. The first one is that I juggle my weekdays to sew, not to do it on the weekend. So I still have to sew because that's what keeps me going.
Yeah.
I have to find time for it. And now, because of the people that I've spoken to and the sort of topics those people have touched on, I'm a lot more mindful of how I source my fabrics and notions.
Right, cool.
So that's it's the podcast conversations that have affected my sewing.
Nice. I would answer in the exact same way, to be honest. It's talking to these people, hearing about, for example, like what scraps they keep, what they don't, or that's informed my own sewing a lot. Like recently, I've just made a draft excluder for a friend and a yoga bolster for another friend, both stuffed with scraps, directly influenced by the the podcast episode I was making about scrap strategies, where people were submitting their own ideas, and I was like, that's such a good idea. So yeah. Alrighty, okay. Last two questions. We've got to nearly 2 hours. This is going to be an editing headache, but anyway, we can deal with that later.
It's going to be 2 parts.
Are you going to do 2 parts?
I think so.
That could be a good idea. 2 parts and then the feed swap. So people are so ready for the feed swap by the time it comes. They're like, just give me the feed swap. Right, okay. Do you have any dream guests that you'd love to interview?
No, I don't.
Really?
That's the honest truth. I don't have a dream guest because, look, I'm at episode 427 now.
Oh yeah, you've got a lot of episodes under your belt.
I got plenty. If a dream guest was to come on, if I considered someone who was a dream guest, I would have heart palpitations because of the strength of their ability to speak fluently, answer questions, and I would feel that my questions would bore them, that they've had those questions before.
Ooh.
The sparkle in my eyes have gone for a dream anything.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's terrible.
Well, no, that's a very interesting answer. No, I love it. Okay, I do have a dream guest. Well, I have, as I say, I have an enormous list of people that I would love to speak to.
Yes.
And, you know, I don't literally then go down the list. It's more like sometimes a connection will happen, like somebody contacts you or something happens and it becomes more pertinent to try and get that person on sooner. But I would love to speak to Zero Waste Daniel. I don't know if you know of his work. He's a designer based in New York who creates incredible clothing using scraps that he gets from the garment district, and yeah, he's amazing and his work is incredible, and I would love to speak to him. I don't know if he would be interested in speaking to me because, you know, he doesn't have a connection with the sewing community, you know. I will contact him though one day. I will. Right, last question. Okay. I really like this question. I know I came up with it. If you were forced to start another podcast on a different topic, what would it be about and how would it be different?
Okay. So I couldn't figure out what the topic was that I would do another podcast for.
Not about cycling or anything like that?
Okay. So this is what I've got in the back of my mind when it comes to podcasting, is that a lot of people say that there are a lot of podcasts already about sewing and knitting, right? Or any topic. But when you go to a public library, you'll always find that there are a lot of books on the same topic. but there will always be new books on that topic, right? So
Yeah.
I just have to research what I would want to do the different topic on, but I don't know what it would be. I have no idea at the moment. So I couldn't really come up with a different topic. And I don't know that I would do it as an interview.
Right. Oh, interesting.
I would do it as a series, a 6-part series. And so the first series would be
Right.
the establishing part of whatever the podcast is. And then the next series would be development. And then it would probably finish on the third series where we just go off on a whole bunch of tangents that we kind of touched on in series 1 and 2, and then we just go nuts series 3, and then that would be it. And I think it would be a 6 to 8 part series each time, so that it wouldn't go on forever.
Interesting. And then it'd just be a standalone thing.
I reckon.
Would you do it with somebody else or with a group of people? Would it be a solo thing?
Oh, it wouldn't be solo, because I think I've done that now. I'd try something different. So if it was a series, it would be really well researched. And that's all I can think of. And I've been having fun working. I'm doing a subject in the morning with the advanced diploma students, and they're developing a 4-part series for an organisation. And they all want to be producers, and they didn't want to all be editing. So I said, look, I'll edit 2 episodes out of the 4. So I'm in that process of seeing what that's like. So I'm getting a real life experience with 5 people. So that could be on the cards in the future. I don't know.
Cool. That's really interesting.
I'm trying it out.
Yeah. Have you enjoyed working with other people then?
Yeah, because I've always worked solo. So even when I was full-time, I was a specialist in my field. And that's fine. And I worked in a team, but we all had our cases, or we all had our projects that we were working on. But we did it under a banner, and we swapped ideas, but I always felt kind of isolated, so I'm used to being on my own. But the dynamics of being in a team now, I find, is really fun. Even when things go out the door, it's hilarious.
Brilliant.
Anyway, so I don't know what the topic would be, but I'd want to do it with other people. There was a group project we did last in my diploma, and it was quite eye-opening, and that's all I'll say. But we got through it.
Ooh.
We passed, and the teacher said it's all about the journey, not the outcome. We still had a good outcome, but I'll tell you one thing. We banded together like no one's business, and we had a few hurdles, and it was fun. So I'm more than happy to do group work now.
Interesting. So it could be on the cards. You could make, if the right topic had presented itself and the right group of people came together, you would be open to making another podcast at some point.
Yep. No matter how many hurdles we have to get through, we'll get it done. Because when it comes down to it, you and I know what our deadlines are. We do our production work, and we make it happen.
I love that. I look forward to seeing what that might be.
Inspiring, hey?
Yeah, really interesting. I love that answer.
Yeah. And your take on it?
If I was forced to start another podcast on a different topic, what would it be? It would probably be something about self-sufficiency and small space growing of food.
Oh, yes.
I'm really into that, but I'm not very knowledgeable. So I think it would be great to kind of come at it as a bit of a beginner, a bit of someone as a bit of a newbie, and talk to lots of interesting people and explore the ideas of, is it possible to be self-sufficient in a small growing space? Yeah, it would probably be about that. Yeah, it would be fun. Like you were saying, like it'd be fun to maybe, if not a team, then work with one other person just to share ideas, but also share some of the workload as well. Yeah, because it's a lot. I don't know if you've noticed, it's a lot.
And I think that topic suits you to the T. Yeah.
Well, it's something obviously I've touched on a little bit in Check Your Thread, because I think the things, there's so many parallels between food and clothing. Like it's something that we have to engage in every single day. We have to make choices. It's something that affects everybody. Yeah, there's so many kind of ethical and environmental and waste issues in both of them that I think that if I'm interested in one and the other, there's probably other people that are interested in both as well. So that's why I have gone down that a little bit. But I think that I've had mixed feedback when I've done episodes on things that are entirely separate from sewing. Although I've always tried to kind of link them to sewing a little bit. But yeah, so there we go. Thank you so much for answering all these questions with me.
Thank you for answering them and for coming up with who's going to do what. That was really good of you. Thank you.
Any last words?
I think our listeners are going to love this session as much as we've loved it, because they know what we're all about, and we're happy to make sure that they get podcasts to listen to every week.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Maria.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!